Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. So, first today, I want to talk about the morale in both of the militaries, the Russian military, the Ukrainian military. Where is or what is the state of morale? Now, look, we know at the beginning stages of the conflict, the Ukrainian military performed much better than most outside analysts believed. Even the Pentagon, let's just face it, was claiming that the Russians would be in Kiev in a matter of days, and were offering Zelensky safe passage out of the country. Now, as we look at what has happened over the course of the war, and it has become a longer war than most people had anticipated as well. We're well over a year now. The casualty levels on both sides have been horrendous. Tens of thousands of casualties. Both sides are hesitant to report on actual casualties. The United States believes that as many as 70,000 Ukrainian servicemen have been killed with well over 100,000 wounded. The Russians, we're seeing varying figures. The Ukrainian figures, I don't believe you can take as a reasonable account. They're simply off the chart. At the end of the day, we really don't know what the Russian casualty levels are. Are they on par with the Ukrainian casualties of 70,000 KIA and 120,000 wounded? Yeah, in all probability, yes. In all probability, they may exceed that amount. But if you look at the size of the Ukrainian military at the start of this conflict, and you look at the level of casualties, many of those fighting men who started the war, those volunteers, are no longer around. The dynamics of the Ukrainian military is starting to change. Now look, we're going to see elections in the Russian Federation. We are not going to see elections in Ukraine. Why could that be? Furthermore, we are seeing a divide, a fracture taking place between the Ukrainian high command and the Ukrainian leadership in Kiev led by Zelensky. We are seeing that fracture in the relationship between the Ukrainian Supreme Commander Zaluzhny and President Zelensky. We are seeing edicts, recommendations coming from the West, the United States, certain political bodies in the United States wanting the Ukrainian military to do certain things. Certain things that the high command in the Ukrainian military fully understands it cannot achieve. For instance, the failed Zaporizhzhia offensive. And we started talking about this at the beginning of summer. Anyone who analyzes military affairs understands that the Ukrainians launching this grandiose in scope operation designed to sever the land corridor between Russia proper and Russia Crimea was simply not achievable without air power. Now, we believe that the Ukrainian military, the Ukrainian High Command, was against this operation. They believed it was going to cause unnecessary casualties and an unnecessary loss in material. They also believed, and they also fully understand, that the Russian Federation is continuing to expand its military capability. The Russian military that we observed at the onset of the war is going to look completely different another year, a year and a half to 2 years from now than it looked like at the start of the war. It's going to be a lot bigger, much bigger. Have the Russians lost a lot of equipment? Have they lost a lot of tanks, a lot of armored infantry fighting vehicles? They have, as have the Ukrainians. But the Russians have this vast industrial capacity to replenish a lot of these tanks and armored infantry fighting vehicles. And they're doing that. We're seeing that happen. What Russia produced in 2022 and even this year in 2023 is going to be irrelevant when compared to what production figures look like going into 2024 and 2025. It just is. And Zaluzhny and the Ukrainian High Command understand this, and they did not want to waste those fighting men and that equipment that the Western allies have handed to the Ukrainians. But they did use it, and they did waste a lot of it in these attacks towards the south of Zaporizhia, within the vicinity of Orikhiv, south of Orikhiv. It happened. Lots of equipment and lots of manpower were wasted. That is going to come back and haunt the Ukrainian military once we see this reformation of the Russian military. Its increase in size, its increase in capability. Guaranteed. Compounding that, there's starting to be this hesitancy in the West, especially here in the United States, to just handing over the Ukrainian large sums of cash and materiel, especially with what's happening between Israel and Hamas. And that's going to affect the handover of JDAMs. It's going to, the Ukrainians are not using that many of those systems, but they do use a lot of 155 millimeter systems, as do the Israelis. Those Excalibur laser-guided 155 millimeter rounds are incredibly valuable. Incredibly valuable. And they've been expended at a great rate in Ukraine. Now, as we watch what is happening on the ground today, we are seeing the Russians counterattacking south of Bakhmut near Klishivka. We are seeing the Russian military advance to the north by northwest of Klishivka, and they have gained ground within the last 48 hours. In Avdiivka, we are continuing to see this Russian noose tighten, and you really, again, have to go back and look at the territory that has been gained by the Russians since all this started. So obviously we're back here, okay, beginning of October, and again, watch what has happened here as the Russians continue this operation. And we're going forward now as opposed to reverse. And you can see it down here to the south as well. This is very methodical, very purpose-driven, designed to encircle Avdiivka, cut it off, and then kill Ukrainian forces that are in Avdiivka. And that is happening as we speak. Right now, major battles are taking place for the coke plant to the north by northwest of Avdiivka. The Russians are hammering this site with heavy artillery and using light infantry, motorized infantry to probe and attack this area as well. And that is continuing as we speak. Eventually, because of Russian pressure, this site is going to fall, and the encirclement and the besiegement of Avdiivka will be fully in place. It'll be very difficult for the Ukrainians to supply Avdiivka with any sort of weapons or materiel given this Russian encirclement. Now look, the noose does not have to completely tighten, whereas the Russians have complete fire control and are able to destroy any type of vehicle moving into Avdiivka, and that's what we are seeing happening. So that's where we sit for today. Again, we're starting to hear less information about this really unwise Ukrainian operation that took place on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River. It does not serve any purpose other than the risk of having some of your more elite Marine infantry, naval infantry personnel killed or wounded in operations, again, that really serve no purpose in terms of taking ground or any kind of future-facing efforts for the Ukrainian military. Putting Marines on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River in these swampy, marshy areas that lack any sort of infrastructure, in which the Russians are simply, they really don't care about. Their defensive lines are further back. Again, what purpose does it serve for the Ukrainians other than to lose that personnel and to create this media narrative that this bridgehead has been created, but it's not the same sort of bridgehead as I've talked about in my previous videos that you would correlate with, say, a D-Day amphibious invasion or any sort of large-scale amphibious operation where you bring across large amounts of men, material, personnel, armored vehicles, tanks, supply, and then continue offensive operations. That's not what's happening in this locale. Again, politically driven operations by the Ukrainian military to kind of create this illusion that some sort of victory has occurred, given the dramatic loss of manpower and material that occurred near Orikhiv. Look, guys, this war is going to last a long time, and again, I believe that in the next year to year and a half, the Russian military and its capability, again, is going to look much different than it does now, both in terms of capability, technology, and doctrine, and that is not a good sign for the Ukrainian military. So that's where we sit for today. We will have more very, very soon. As always, thanks for joining us. Have a good day.